Hello, welcome to week 9. This really short video is just going to highlight some of the points that were part of the presentation yesterday. And Wayne McCashin presented a seminar at Casuarina campus around participation, empowerment and community building. Unfortunately, there is not a PowerPoint or a video that goes with this. However, I have uploaded in the learning materials, I've uploaded the notes from Wayne's presentation. And there's about 12 pages of notes. I encourage you to read through those notes, particularly for students who were not as part of the presentation. And I'll just go to a couple of pages and highlight a couple of points from Wayne's presentation. I just want to say too that Wayne McCashin is the author of 2 books, The Strengths Approach and Communities of Hope. Both of these books are available in the Casuarina Library, and you can also contact libraries to have interlibrary exchange on those. So if you're wanting to make reference to Wayne's work, they're the 2 key texts that he has actually written, and the handouts, the 12 pages, are based on notes from those 2 books. I just wanted to highlight a couple of things in the presentation that draw to your attention some of the things that were discussed, and also encourage external students who are not part of the session to actually go through some of the exercises that were suggested. Part of the presentation Wayne talked about was power, and defining the terms what power over means versus power with, and how to focus on strengths and what are the conditions for change, and having a bit of a mind map for community participation and what the key elements might be in that, and then the stages and processes for community building. All of these concepts are areas that people can do training in, and training can last over a number of days and can go up to a week. So just be aware that what is in these 12 pages is very much a summary of a lot of training and work that people do in preparation to becoming strengths-based practitioners. In particular, Wayne used some examples in individual work to highlight how different and how empowering the process can be to enable people to talk about their issues and their situations in a way that helps people to move forward. And he highlights some of the barriers that can prevent people making changes in their lives. And on page 2, you will see quite a discussion about what power over means. And we've had some discussion about this in class, that sometimes for experts and trained people, there's a tendency to want to tell people what's wrong with them. There's a tendency to want to advise people and even sometimes blame people. And unfortunately, sometimes workers also can get caught up in behaving that way. So the emphasis on experts and other people having answers and ideas about how to address someone's situation can have the effect on people that it disempowers them, and that people withdraw and people don't want to participate. The exercise that I'll draw your attention to on page 3 that encouraged people to think about and actually experience what that was like was to talk, and I'd encourage you to do this on your own, to, for example, think about if someone is not listening to you, how do you feel when someone else behaves that way to you? If someone isn't listening to you, how does that affect you? And then what sort of behaviour does that bring out in you? What do you do? How do you react? How do you respond to that? So we had quite a bit of discussion about that, and people talked about withdrawing, not wanting to speak to that person at all, and also talking about feeling angry when we're not listened to. So the power over exercise on page 3 is an opportunity for you to have a look at some of those different behaviours that we've all encountered, and sometimes we've actually behaved that way towards someone else. And when you go down to the question about what happens if someone is labelling you, what happens if someone is labelling you as a bad parent, a naughty kid, someone who should be, given a good talking to, these sorts of things. What's the effect that has on you? And then how do you respond? How do you act? So have a look at those exercises on page 3 for yourself, and just observe what some of the impacts are when those power over behaviours occur. There's another term that Wayne talks about, and that is power with. And one of the critical ways that he discussed exercising that condition, power with, was to also focus on people's strengths. And some people think that focusing on strengths is just about being positive. It's actually more than that. And strengths are different traits or different characteristics, and they can be defined as skills and capacities. So the interpersonal skills, the intellectual skills, the physical skills that someone has, the resources in the environment. So, someone being part of a family, an extended family, having a good neighbourhood, having a network of friends, having strong culture. These are things that are resources. And motivations. So what motivates people? What drives people? What are their hopes and dreams? What are the things that they value the most? Those areas on page 4 I talked about, they're the traits that we focus on as community workers who are wanting to work with people in a way that demonstrates power with and acknowledges that people have got abilities to deal with issues. There was also another group exercise that you can use to reflect on, that's on page 5 in that handout. And you could write it down on your own. Choose one of the strengths on that list that's in that table on page 5. Just choose one of those strengths and just write down a story or an example of you doing that, where you've used that strength. Talk about it, write it down. If you get the chance to tell somebody else, that's even better. And one of the reflections that was made about doing this exercise was how people were impacted on by telling that story. How were people left feeling after they told that story to someone else? The people who were listening to that story needed to also listen and allow the person to talk about that story in which they were telling about a strength. And then what they were to notice was also other strengths that the person described or used in that situation. So just by talking about one strength often releases energy for people to talk about other strengths. So that's a group exercise on page 5 that you can use. Just write it down for yourself. The other page that I just wanted to draw your attention to was on page 7. So it's really a case study of how using a case plan, or Wayne refers to it as a mind map, a way of listing and recording different parts of a situation that's happening in someone's life, can become a tool for looking towards the future. So on page 7, there's an example of how Andrea, as a mother with children who are not doing well at the moment at school, who are getting into trouble, and who's feeling really tired and overwhelmed, and whose one of her daughters is involved in the juvenile justice system, how she worked with a worker and how that worker was able to work with her and talk about her worries, which are listed on the left-hand side on that table. So she still got to talk about what was bothering her, but then also moved on to talk about what her picture of the future was. How did she want things to be in the future? How did she see things changing? How did she see things when they were better? What does it look like when things are going well for you? The worker worked with her and asked her the right questions to enable her to talk about that future. She was also able to talk about in the next column the things that are good, the things that are good right now. So with the worker, she was able to make a plan and list these things. We stick together as a family. My daughter Stephanie looks after the boys. I get the kids breakfast when I'm not too tired. My daughter has never done anything illegal before. So this parent who was quite overwhelmed was able to talk about the things that are good. And then in the fourth column, she's talking about the resources that I could use. What could I use that would help me or assist me in my situation? And the first example there is that the principal at the school doesn't judge me. This is just an example of individual work, where a worker is definitely working with a mother and her family. However, it highlights a really powerful tool that can be used also in group work and in community development work as well. And the focus is what people are actually doing well and what they are doing in a way that is actually working for them, and supporting them to see that there are things in their life that are currently that they're exercising some strengths in their life. And that's often an area where people are overwhelmed with when they're feeling overloaded and overburdened by responsibilities of life, which will happen in community work because people with personal issues will be part of communities in which you're working. They will be the people coming to community meetings, that people will come with other issues. So page 8 again goes through that process about having a strength-based process for conversation, planning and action. And you will see the questions listed, the types of questions that enable people to focus on and see the areas of their life that they do have some control over, that they are having some success in, and that they do have capacity, and that they have a picture of the future. Look, I'm just going to leave that finished there. I encourage you to go through the 12 pages, and some of the terms you will become familiar with from your previous readings, and also from other seminars in this unit. And if you want to access the resources, access the books, they are available through the library. Thank you. Bye.